Good morning, CambridgeMUN. I'm really excited to have a small part in your conference here. Wish I could have been there in person, but next best thing, I guess. I'm excited for this conference on many levels, but particularly so much of my hope for the future and for the UN in general stems from my belief in the power of the MUN program. We've only been involved in a few. Recently, we were in Doha at the Thyman Qatar MUN conference and spoke to the Security Council there. And I was I was really impressed with the amount of work you guys put into these conferences, number one. And number two, your commitment to not only learning, but building a more peaceful tomorrow. That's good for my heart. So anyway, many of you know Carl Wilkins, and I was in Rwanda. Oh, the snow. Yeah, I just thought maybe you could use a little snow in Abu Dhabi. We're in Pennsylvania right now. In 1990, Teresa and I moved to Rwanda with our 3 small children, went there to build schools, operate clinics. We were with the Adventist Development Relief Agency, and we were there for 4 years before the genocide started. That night, the plane was shot down. We actually heard the explosion from our house, and we didn't really know. Well, at first we didn't know what it was, but then when we heard it was the president's plane, we knew it was bad, but we didn't know how bad. We didn't know it was the beginning of the murder of nearly 1 million people. We actually had 2 people, a young lady living in our home who was part of the minority group that they'd been working for several years to construct this enemy, to convince people that here's the dangerous people, here's the people we need to get rid of, and the smaller tribe in Rwanda. Just because her ID card said Tutsi meant that she was marked to be eliminated. And a young man who worked at our home in the evening as watchman, same situation. When all the foreigners were leaving, my wife and I, we couldn't just leave these people to what we were convinced would be certain death. And so Teresa and I made the decision that I would stay, we didn't think it would last more than 2 weeks, much less 3 months. But yeah, that's a whole nother story. What I want to share with you today, though, at the beginning of this conference, or whenever I'm talking to you during the conference, is not only the power of presence. I mean, the fact that me being able to stay actually helped save the lives of those 2 people just by being present. I want to tell you another story that I think illustrates the power of presence, and then also the need for allies in every situation, especially in a crisis, and how the potential for good is in everybody. And if you believe that, then you've got a really good chance of finding allies where many people wouldn't find allies. You know, it's the problems in Syria. We're like, okay, where are the allies? And right now in Central African Republic, who are our allies? Because allies are people who share the same passion and vision. Well, no, wait a minute. Not necessarily. They don't always share the same passion and vision. Sometimes they do. Sometimes allies might have very different motives, but we might be able to come together on one thing at one point that could save lives or that could build peace. So I better be careful about generalizing about allies. But I want to talk about the importance of allies and how sometimes allies come from very unexpected places. During the Rwandan genocide, I was stuck in my home for 3 weeks. The government said nobody, 24/7 curfew, nobody out. But finally, after 3 weeks, they let us out. I met the colonel who was in charge of the city. He became a very important ally, but I'm going to buzz past that right towards the end of the genocide. This colonel, actually, he directed me to 2 orphanages, and there was another orphanage down the street that were desperate for help. So throughout the genocide, I was helping bring food and water, medicine to these 3 groups of orphans around the city. We had to go through roadblocks. There were people shooting sometimes at us. Often we were in the crossfire. It was a horrible, horrible time. But the story I want to just kind of briefly touch on with you today is towards the end of the genocide. Gasikwa, a Rwandan man who worked with me, courageous man. He had more than 40 people who were seeking protection in his home. He and I were taking water to the orphanage. He was driving a big dump truck with barrels of water. I was driving my little car. And when we pulled into the gate, I mean, this orphanage, first time we got there, there were little graves in the parking lot. not from children who'd been killed with machetes, but children who were dying of diarrhea, dysentery. And so we came in the parking lot this day, though, to bring water. It was life or death. This water really meant life or death. And within minutes, we were surrounded by a squad of Intrahamwe, the people who were doing the killing. And they had threatened the people the day before. We only found out now that they had threatened them the day before. We're coming, everybody get out of here. We know there's Tutsis hiding here. We want this place empty tomorrow. Everyone's going to die. And they came back now to follow up on that threat. And long story short, there was about a 2.5-hour standoff, maybe 3 hours. For some reason, while I was there, they were circled around us. They wouldn't come in. They saw me. They wouldn't come in. You know, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours is a long time. I was on the radio calling the UN, Mama Papa Zero, this is ADRA 1, come in. That was the UN and humanitarian group. And well, they couldn't come and help me. Finally, Philip at the Red Cross managed to get some police to come to our assistance. And there were about 7 of them that came. Wonderful. Boy, when they came in the driveway, what a relief. But the story wasn't over because they didn't want to spend the night. They said, we're too outnumbered. There were probably about 50 militia guys all around with their machine guns. They said, we're too outnumbered. You go talk to our commander. Get us some backups. And now I'm thinking, oh no, wait a minute. Are they going to really stay here and protect these kids, or will they join with the militia? Because sometimes the police during the genocide joined in the killing. And so it was a terribly difficult decision. Could I trust this man, you know, or should I stay? But then if I stay, what are we going to do? He's telling me he'll stay until we get reinforcements. He's telling me go talk to his commander. I'm thinking if I just stay and say no, what will happen? And honestly, I don't know what would have happened if I would have stayed. But I'm so glad that even though I chose to leave, that lieutenant stood firm, and the orphanage was not attacked. I actually got to the office of the colonel who was out of town, and the prime minister, well, the bogus prime minister, was visiting at the time, and visiting the city at the time. And he's one of 3 people in charge of the genocide. He's in fact in prison today for crimes against humanity. The secretary told me, ask the prime minister. When I explained the orphanage is surrounded, there's some policemen holding them back. We need help out there. She says, ask the prime minister. I'm like, wait a minute. This is the guy in charge of the whole genocide. Why would I ask him for help? But you remember that thing about allies and believing that everybody can at least make one good decision. I listened to the secretary. I asked this prime minister, and crazy enough, he did. He used his influence, and those kids were not killed. In fact, he used his influence, and those children were moved a couple days later to another part of the city. Still wasn't safe, but was better than that part. And you know, I think back on that, and I think about, number one, the secretary. If I wouldn't have listened to the secretary, who knows what would have happened. We've got to listen to the people who are there in the middle of it with their feet on the ground. Not that they have the whole picture, but they've got a huge part of the picture that is often ignored. We've got to believe that the potential for good is in everyone, because that's how we sometimes find our most valuable allies. And not that they're going to make good decisions the rest of their life or even the rest of the week, but maybe this one moment they'll make a good decision. And we've got to understand the power of presence. Often it's not guns. It's about simply being there. And so I don't want to end our little visit here today, though, without telling you how wonderful the progress is in Rwanda, how courageous, how people are moving forward with courage, with forgiveness, incredible resilience. Young people in Rwanda, Proclaimers of Love and Peace is one organization, Never Again is another organization, has 45,000 students in 250 high schools in Rwanda, about 31 universities, 45,000 members. People working together in Rwanda to honestly build peace and to say we don't want anything like this to ever happen again in our country. The last thing I want to leave with you is from the people of Rwanda, and I think the way that they move forward, they still put one step in front of the other, and that is the people in Rwanda seem to have the ability to not focus on what is behind them, what they have lost. You'll never forget your family, of course, that you lost, but they seem to be focusing more on what they have, what remains, and saying, you know, we won't be defined by what was taken from us. We won't be defined by what we lost. will be defined by what we do with what remains. Or like one high school kid said who visited Rwanda, he says, it seems like in Rwanda, people are defined by what they do next. You know, a lot of places people say you're defined by what you do, but this idea of what you do next, I think that's a huge part. And it's something that's become really important in my life, focusing on what remains and what we do with what remains. Hey, I wish you all the best conference. I hope we can meet up sometime. Facebook, World Outside My Shoes, or worldoutsitemyshoes.org. Send me if you have questions or things that we could connect, or maybe Skype with your school. Would love to do it. Thanks so much for you students who organized this conference, and I hope we'll meet sometime face to face. Thanks.